Welcome to today's Explainer. Have you ever wondered why humanity's path to the future kind of feels like a really precarious tightrope walk? Today, we're exploring the ultimate stages of global collapse, the highly fragile systems we've built, and what it truly takes for us to survive. Okay, let's dive into this. Will humanity actually survive the transition? We often like to think of progress as this straight, unbreakable line moving steadily forward, right? But the data and the theories we're analyzing today suggest something entirely different. Progress isn't a guarantee at all. It's a precarious transition phase. Honestly, it's a gauntlet. And the big question isn't just about what flashy new technologies we're going to invent, but whether our species has the fundamental durability to survive the very process of advancing. To really understand what we're transitioning to, we have to look at a major developmental milestone, a Type 1 civilization. This is the exact phase humanity is currently moving toward right now. It's a massive level of global development where a species masters the absolute entirety of its home planet's energy. But here's the critical part. Reaching a Type 1 civilization is not guaranteed, not by a long shot. The journey from where we are right now to that milestone is incredibly perilous, filled with totally unique vulnerabilities that we've never faced before as a species. Which brings us to a terrifying yet honestly fascinating concept, the Great Filter. The transition to a Type 1 civilization is so incredibly dangerous that we might face a theoretical barrier. Think of it as a highly dangerous phase specifically designed, in a cosmic sense, to wipe out a developing species before it can successfully advance. The Great Filter posits that there is a bottleneck, an evolutionary sieve, basically, and only the most resilient, adaptable, and careful civilizations actually make it through without destroying themselves.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the inherent science of our modern society reveals a massive paradox. High-density systems equal high fragility. As we develop toward that Type 1 status, we build incredibly complex networks. We're talking global supply chains, intertwined digital economies, massive energy grids. But the science actually shows us that as the density and complexity of a system increase, so does its fragility. We are literally engineering our own vulnerability here. A failure in just one highly connected node can cascade rapidly, threatening the entire structure. It's basically a giant house of cards.
Let's look at how this fragility actually plays out in the real world by contrasting two seemingly completely different events. On one hand, we have a technical failure at the Cheyenne Mountain complex, and on the other, the ancient concept of the mandate of heaven, which represents an ecological failure. By putting these two side by side, we prove a really vital point. Systemic fragility isn't just some modern technological problem. It's a persistent, overarching civilizational problem. Whether you're dealing with computer code or crop yields, complex human systems are always walking a razor's edge.
And it's a terrifying reality to comprehend. A single, solitary simulation tape nearly triggered World War III at Cheyenne Mountain. Just think about that for a second. In our high-density, highly fragile modern system, a tiny, localized technical glitch, literally someone running a training tape on the wrong computer, almost resulted in the nuclear end of our entire civilization. It perfectly illustrates how incredibly delicate our advanced survival truly is. We were absolutely that close.
And this brilliantly illustrates that systemic fragility isn't just a modern issue. The ancient concept of losing the mandate of heaven was essentially a primitive recognition of civilizational collapse due to ecological failure. Ancient societies, they didn't have nuclear launch computers to worry about, but they deeply understood systemic global collapse. When the ecology failed, when the rain stopped and the crops died, the entire political and social system shattered. They recognized the exact same high-density fragility we face today, just through an ecological lens rather than a technological one. Let's move on and see how this builds, because these threats don't just stay localized, they escalate dramatically. We can map out a really clear scientific pattern, scaling all the way from earthly disasters to universal catastrophes. On the lower end, as a species moving toward Type 1, we face localized earthly disasters, things like supervolcanoes and the resulting volcanic winters. But as you scale up to incredibly advanced Type 4 through 7 civilizations, the threats don't just disappear, they escalate to universal cosmic doom, literally dealing with the very laws of physics. So let's walk through this timeline of mounting suspense. Step 1, we absolutely must survive our localized disasters, our supervolcanoes, our ecological failures, our Cheyenne Mountain glitches. Then, step 2, we must navigate the treacherous Great Filter transition itself, advancing without triggering our own high-density collapse. And if we somehow manage to thread that needle, well, we arrive at step 3, facing the ultimate universal catastrophes. The narrative of civilizational advancement isn't some victory lap, it's an escalating series of increasingly massive hurdles.
let's just review the sheer volume of threats a developing species has to face. Supervolcanoes that can completely block out the sun, volcanic winters that starve entire continents, the high-density system collapse that we trigger ourselves through our own technical or ecological fragility, and finally, waiting right at the very end of the cosmic timeline, entropy. Just seeing them all listed out really puts the immense challenge of the Great Filter into perspective, doesn't it? It's a lot.
And this brings us to the absolute peak of universal tension, type 4 to 7 catastrophes, entropy and the end of existence. Even if we pass the Great Filter, even if we completely master our high-density systems and totally avoid ecological collapse, the universe itself is winding down. Entropy is the ultimate threat. It basically means that advanced civilizations don't just fight for peace or prosperity. Eventually, they have to figure out how to survive the physical end of existence itself. Now, I know exactly what you might be thinking. This all sounds incredibly bleak, right? But we actually need a complete paradigm shift here. Instead of viewing these escalating threats with pure existential dread, we need to view them with clinical, evolutionary observation. This isn't just a depressing story about doom, it's a story about a test. By changing how we look at these systemic fragilities, we actually empower ourselves to solve them. So the crucial point is that we have to reframe these apocalyptic threats. The possibility of collapse isn't a tragedy. It's a standard biological hurdle. It's a rigorous technical survival test designed for literally any developing species. We are totally reframing the very concept of the end of the world. It's not a punishment, it's an exam. Every single species that wants to reach type 1, let alone type 7, has to prove it's capable of managing high-density fragility without self-destructing. Which leaves us with this final, inescapable question. Will we pass the ultimate survival test? We've seen the extreme fragility of our systems, from ancient ecologies to modern computer simulations. We know the Great Filter is looming right over us as we transition toward a Type 1 civilization. The test has been handed to us. We know the parameters, and we absolutely know the catastrophic stakes of failing. The only thing left to determine is whether humanity has the collective wisdom to pass. Thank you so much for joining me for today's explainer. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.